All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Intel Inspires 2021 session of Best Practices for Hiring Esports Coaches and Program Staff. My name is Dana Hustedt. I am the Director of Esports at Florida Institute of Technology, also known as Florida Tech in Melbourne, Florida. And alongside me today, I have a really great friend and colleague from the esports space, Adam Antor.
That's me. My name is Adam Antor. I'm the director of esports at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida, Dana's now neighbor. And I'm really excited to be a part of this presentation. Thanks for the invitation, Dana.
Oh, I'm so excited. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I cannot wait to dive into some of this topic today, which I think is something that you and I have experienced a lot of in our time in collegiate, as well as in just all of our esports career so far. And I think we have some great insight to not only people who are looking to be hired, right, but things that we've experienced, the pros, the cons, the things that also employers need to be looking at. So we have quite a mix of viewers going to be tuning in today, and we're so excited to share this information with you. So let's just hop right into it, okay? We have our discussion board of some of those items that we are going to be covering. And I'm going to try to fix this little video real quick so that we don't cover those words up. So Adam, in your experience, what is deemed a quote unquote good hire? What are those qualifications that higher ed institutions are seeking? And some of the characteristics that, have bode well for you in your experience, if you want to dive into it.
I think what's really interesting is that both of us are at new institutions. So we just went through the process on the other side of actually going through as a potential hire. So I think we have a little bit of unique insider info there. But what's really interesting is that a lot of people in esports believe that the only qualification someone is seeking is their knowledge within the esports industry. But what we're finding is something totally different, at least in higher ed. My best hires, and I believe what the schools that I've interviewed with are looking more for, is a level of maturity and that the level of maturity, I think, is an important piece, but and some knowledge in the esports industry is obviously important, but more importantly, it's like, is this person someone I can trust with our students? And are they going to do something really dumb is really the question, the first question that a hiring manager is making. And that, I think, can get lost in translation when someone just looks at a esports coach position and sees, oh, a master's degree is preferred and they're not listing a salary, this is dumb, and throws it out the window. But there's a lot of years of hiring that are going, hiring experience that are going into these job descriptions. So there's another side of the story. I don't know what would you put into that?
I'm glad you say that, right? Because the qualifications, a lot of these higher ed institutions typically are having on those descriptions, right, are, we need you to have a master's degree and 8 years experience. Well, look at some of us. It's not possible for us to have 8 years of career experience yet, because this esports industry, a lot of these hires are younger individuals, right? They could be 20-year-olds who have come from the pro scene. They could be just young people in general that have graduated college and they're looking for their first job at an institution. And sometimes that can be definitely a little bit discouraging, and you and I have heard it across the board from people. So we're trying to tailor those job descriptions now to make sure that they really are capturing the best hire that we can, regardless of having 8-10 years of experience that a higher ed institution wants. However, it has been, across the board, we've seen having a bachelor's degree in general to work at a higher ed institution is typically a requirement. Now, not always, right? In some coaching positions, it is allowed, even if they have maybe a 2-year degree, which is also awesome. But when you tend to work at a higher ed institution, they want to see that you've also fulfilled that mission, right? It's kind of like almost like a phony if you or I didn't get our degree, but we're telling kids that they should finish their 4 years. I think we've seen that quite often. So I would say, some of the things you can potentially negotiate with different institutions, but a lot of times they definitely are seeking having at least a degree in order to be at that higher ed level.
Yeah.
What are some of those? Yeah, go ahead.
No, that absolutely true. And I've heard of coaches who have earned positions because they're qualified, but they don't have that bachelor's degree. They find a smaller institution that's willing to take that chance on them. But then they're looking at bigger institutions and just not getting an interview or the potential to go further in the interview process because they don't have their bachelor's. I mean, it's important for a college to recognize the value that they're creating. If they don't put value on a degree, why are they giving them in the first place is really
Right.
a good question to answer there.
And it's
Yeah,
always tough too, right? Because we see a lot of qualified candidates who don't have it. So where is that middle ground, right? And
yeah,
there is no perfect answer. You and I both know that. We dealt with staff that we really want to bring on, and sometimes it's not our call, right? As directors of programs, unfortunately, we can't always make that decision. But there are times, right, that we can go and advocate for that person. I think we're starting to see the tables turn a little bit in some institutions who are trying to gather those people who can lead their program the best way. And sometimes they can even get their degree while they're in their job, which is also another great aspect of being hired by an institution.
yeah, that's absolutely true. I know a couple of people who've been hired at an institution while they were um, about to finish a degree, and it was kind of in their contract when they signed, like, you must finish your degree by the end of the first
Mhm.
semester, but we'll still hire you. But when we look at beyond like the head coach director position, we look at who we're hiring when it comes to game coaches. The requirements change a little bit, and the level of importance on some of those qualifications change. So obviously we know how to run a program. So we don't necessarily need to find somebody who knows how to run a program. What we need to find is somebody who can fill a skill set that we don't fill. So for me, I don't know Overwatch. So I'm looking for an Overwatch coach who knows Overwatch at a high level. Um, I don't expect them to recruit for what we're looking for. Our job descriptions and what we looked at currently are more part-time, and I handle the recruitment side of things, and that's what I did at Aquinas, at least the first 2 years. So each position in esports, just like any other industry, is going to have a different set of qualifications and requirements. And I know you're probably well aware of that too. So I don't know if you could speak to any experience you've had. Have you been
Yeah,
hiring game coaches, and what have you found?
yeah, and I my former experience being at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa, being my first program, we were looking for people who were the knowledgeable individuals about the game, and then I would handle the actual institution admissions, financial, actual recruitment side. Because right, I'm not going to be able to know every single game of what person I'm looking for to bring in as the top player. We all are facing that right now, and making sure that we have the people who are in those coaching positions that are not only looking at gameplay, right? We want to recruit students who and also the staff, right, that are looking at the intangibles, right? What are the communication skills like? Can we have conversation talking about the academic side? Just because you are hired as a game knowledge coach, right, of a specific game title does not necessarily mean that you don't have a conversation on all the other aspects of the program. You need to be a leader just in general to represent the actual institution. There's a lot more that goes into having a position in esports than just being about esports. And that is something we're also going to dive into next when we talk about best practices and hiring some of those employees of what we're seeking in those prospects. Like, are they able to be that person who's going to go to bat for the institution? They have to be invested, right, and loyal, and they want to make sure that they're making it the best program that they can and not just a means to an end.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about this hiring student employees. Best practices. I get weary of the idea of, all right, does somebody really have all the best practices in esports already? Because we're so new. And you touched on it
Right.
earlier, like how are we expected to have 8 years of experience? No one in college esports has been doing coaching or directing more than 4 years, 5 years. I mean, you look, Clerky might be above that, but like Kurt
Right.
Melcher, who started it, he's not in collegiate esports at a
Right.
program anymore. So, yeah, well, let's start. What are your best practices for hiring
Yeah.
student employees and others.
And I think this is important, right? With the people that we bring into the program, not all institutions are fortunate enough to have, multiple full-time staff or even part-time staff. Employees are a big ask at any institution. So we lean on student employees. And I have had the fortunate opportunity to bring, federal work study students, as well as just all sorts of student staff, whether it's volunteer or paid. And the things that I'm looking for, right? The positive, the motivated, the ones who want to be around to make it an engaging experience at the school. Some of them may not even have esports experience, right? But they have other really great qualities and skill sets, such as graphic design or broadcast knowledge or journalism. The people who want to represent the program and tell our story are those who I'm looking at, right? I want the student who I know is going to show up on time and that I can rely on with different tasks, because, right, our jobs get overloaded. We need to be able to delegate those tasks and have trustworthy and reliable student employees, but also at the same time that they're able to learn something from us, right? Our programs are not just meant to be a job. We're trying to get them, resume builders. And these student employees are just so important to the way that our programs are going to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think from a director or coach's perspective, the first best practice I could offer up is, before you advertise a position anywhere on social or anywhere, get it approved by HR. Even if your boss says you're approved from a budgetary standpoint, go
Right.
to HR, get the sign off. I've had so many problems both at Aquinas and now a little bit at Florida Southern of like, my boss says everything's good, we're good, and then HR stops everything halfway through the process of searching. And it's so frustrating, but it's also a really important step. So
Absolutely.
there's just a lot when you talk about student workers and hiring part-time and full-time coaches, like HR has got to be involved. That's what HR is there for. And it could be a slow process. Like sometimes I find a student, I'm like, whoa, you have so much broadcast talent. I want to hire you right now. And then you kind of got to take a step back and say, all right, let's go through the process. It's probably going to take at least a month because that's just how HR works.
So slow.
but yeah, and it starts there. And then when I'm looking at hiring student workers, there's kind of two pots. It's the group of student workers for delegation. Is it things that I just don't have time to handle? And then there's another pot that's really exciting for me, is like students who have a talent that I don't have. So like you think of video editors, social media people, or graphic designers, casters. Those are skills I don't own. So like, even if I had more time, I wouldn't be able to do it. So finding students on campus is so exciting in that regard, in addition to the delegation, because we have some really talented students. I'm pretty sure you got some smart kids over at Florida Tech too. So
we do, and I'm very proud of them. And that's just been so exciting of, getting all those new ideas, right? They are an extension of us, right, to make our programs go. And we're hoping that we can equip them, but I'm also learning every day from them. They bring such great things to the table. And I think that's what you have to rely on your campuses. It's about the students, at the end of the day, whoever you end up hiring, whether it's an employee, full-time or part-time, they are representing your program, and they're trying to expand and grow and make it a better engagement opportunity for your campus. So the people that you are putting in these responsibility roles are so vital to your success.
Yeah. Have you had, I don't know, because we're kind of both new. I don't know if we've gotten full 4 years or something, but student workers, do you have a success story of a student worker you hired and now graduated, found something to do, or is getting work on the side somewhere? Like, do you have that story?
Sure.
Yeah.
I have several who ended up getting some casting time in some amateur leagues, which is awesome. They would cast our collegiate games, and then they're getting picked up to do some of those. Also, it's graphic design work. I've had several who do paid commission work now, and that's amazing, right? They're doing things that they like. And then also just people who have gone on to take esports roles in different companies. It's just really exciting to see that they ended up getting their degree, they were getting scholarship, right? And then they worked on those skills or their game talents. And now they are doing that either for another school or an actual company who may put events on, or just all of the esport things that we all strive to hand them off to. They're going and doing the big things that we knew that they could do.
Isn't that is what like makes me smile, is like,
I know.
they're like, I know Doc always talks about like the graduation walking is like his proud moment. Like my proud moment, obviously graduation's like the goal for most of us,
Right.
but then seeing a student like find their passion and then find a way to
Yep.
make that their like living after is so cool to me. And I've had
It
casters
is.
too. I haven't had as many graphic design students that I've kind of empowered in that regard, but casters, Powder's one of them that I always talk about. And he was on CRL this past summer, like in front of thousands of people was casting. And this was a kid who
Amazing.
tried out for Rocket League at Aquinas 2 years ago, was a silver player. And I told him, no, we don't have a spot for you, but you could
Oh my
cast.
gosh.
And he said, sure. So yeah, if you've got a passion, if you're a student out there, try to just reach out like to your coach, director, see what skill sets or passions you have, and have that conversation.
Right. So let's lead right into our next one. What did we learn from our hiring experience?
Oh, gosh. Let me think about this one. Do you have one that you want to start with that I'll?
I'm actually going, I think the biggest one is hiring the people who want to be there, and it's not just a job, right? When you get into our positions, you have to actually care about the institution and the students, and their getting to the goal line, right? Essentially. And I think sometimes we see people who just want to say that they're working in esports, but like not understanding the heavy workload that could come along with it when you are starting a brand new collegiate esports program, right? Or taking on the responsibility of now 50 or 100 kids under you, right? It's a whole new ball game. And I think I learned, right, that I'm looking for the person who wants to invest in the program and trust the process and help build the process versus just showing up and being there and clocking out right at the exact time, right? Like there are times where we have to invest in our students.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that the passion piece, sometimes it's hard to decipher true passion and fake passion in the interview process, but having casual conversations on the side can often lead to that. I'm not looking for people to come in and volunteer 80 hours a week when I look at coaches. But to showcase that you're willing to do the extra things can really lead to numerous opportunities. Like even if it's not overtime pay or additional pay, it shows that you care. And we started at Aquinas with like so low budget, and we started with 4 volunteer coaches year one. And I think I had 4 volunteer coaches, and 2 of them wanted to go full-time into esports. And by the end of the year, those 2 were full-time in esports. Like one's at Oakland University, one's at Grand Valley State now. And
you've had awesome success stories. Yeah, I loved watching that.
Yeah. And they just happened to be from Grand Rapids. And a lot of it was just connecting with local people who liked esports and then giving them an opportunity. And it's the same thing with the students. It's like empower your students to follow that passion, and obviously course correct and coach along the way so they don't make mistakes that are big. I mean, everyone's going to make mistakes, but empowering has been kind of where I've tried to be, kind of put myself as like, I've got people who are passionate. Let's see what they can do.
Now, what about the advice for the employer, right? Things that you and I have seen, and we've had to advise institutions on in those hiring practices.
Okay. Yeah. I just left Aquinas, and I was a little bit involved in the hiring process there in the application pool. And I'll just say, like, if you're a student who's about to graduate looking for a job in esports, specifically in higher ed or anywhere, go to your local career center and have your resume looked at, because misspellings, like just poor grammar, poor things. Same with the cover letter. And also, if you're applying to a lot of places, change the word or the school name in your cover letter, because there were plenty of cover letters I saw that still had Illinois Wesleyan University on it, because that was the last big director job out there, and it was for the Aquinas job. And you're like, okay, instantly kicked out. And you're like, small mistake, 5 seconds. Those small things is what an HR department are going to just automatically throw out, even though they don't know esports or they don't know who you are. So just make it harder for them to say no. Like what about you? What have you learned?
My advice goes to the actual employer, making sure that you have very clear cut expectations and not undercompensate, which is actually going to lead me into our next little area. Things not to do when hiring staff, right? And I'm going to go to number 2, the improper compensation for time and energy, making sure that you are actually having that salary upfront, stipend, whatever it's going to be. It's extremely important. And it is a very good practice now that, and also we've heard it, right? The hooting and hollering of people who want to see this way earlier in the process, because you can make it through all 6 interviews and then it's going to be $30,000. We have to also make a living. So I think the biggest thing to the employers, right? This is not a necessarily easy job, especially when you're asking people to build something from scratch. Being compensated properly is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to expectations of the program. I've talked to schools who tell me I want to be as competitive as Maryville. And then they're like, well,
Yep.
we have $3,000 for a head coach position. And you're like, no, like expectations are just different. I
Right.
think some of these $30,000 jobs, they're based off of an athletic coach, traditionally at their institution, which it's different, but we can talk about that on a different panel. But
Right.
what I'm saying is there's a precedent for some of those salary levels.
Mhm.
Don't be mad at the institution for wanting to do that, but don't apply for the job if that's not going to meet your
Right.
expectations. And from the
Right.
institution's perspective, be transparent about it. Like if
Yep.
you're offering 35,000, don't expect somebody who's making or who could be making 60 or 70 to come apply for your job. You're going to get a
Right.
lower quality candidate. Like just be upfront
Absolutely.
with that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
that's a
also added
long
on
time.
here things not to do when hiring, right? Is saying that the employee must recruit or gain X amount of students and provide the improper resources.
Yeah.
If you don't have the budget to do so, or you don't have additional staff, or you don't have a facility, right? A dedicated room, it's pretty hard to say that we need to gain 20 students in order to maintain a program
Yes.
by the
The
next fall recruiting class.
those
I see this with a
expectations,
huge
yeah.
issue.
No, yeah, the expectations have stayed the same, but the amount of programs has skyrocketed. So it's become more difficult. So I still
Right.
see programs who are like, we want to hire 20 or we want to recruit 20 kids year 1, hire the head coach in March. So they have 4-5 months to figure it out. And are we giving scholarships? No, or it's $1,000 a year. And
Yep.
the expectations just do not meet the resources. And that's a really important theme, I think, for this entire
Yeah.
conversation.
You are so right. And I can't wait to continue that conversation. And hopefully we'll be back for another panel. So with the last, little bit here from us, this is just a nice little quote that we found. Great vision without great people is irrelevant. And honestly, in our industry, I think this speaks mountains, right? And my last piece of advice is you are hiring persons to run a small business, which is your esports program that is actually inside of your operation, which is the institution. So do not take this lightly. Hiring is so important. We want to keep that, employee turnover low, even though in esports it can be burnouts. So making sure that you're taking care of those employees is my last tidbit of information. What about you, Adam? Anything
I
for
don't
our
have
viewers
anything.
here before we
I
head into
just,
Q&A?
yeah, no, I just want to say thank you for having me, Dana. And I really like this conversation. I think it's a really important one to have. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing the questions. Bring them on.
Awesome. Well, if anybody does have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll have our contact information in the Intel Inspires area. And then join us for Q&A. See you soon, everyone.